Full name is Yousef Sameh. I go by Joe because not everybody can say Yousef, so I'm also known as Joe. I was born and raised here in the high desert, but my father is Turkish Arabic. That's where the name Yousef comes from his side of the family. I was born at George Air Force Base. Been here pretty much my whole life. Couple years when my dad was in the Air Force and stationed in Nellis Air Force Base. We were out in Nevada. Spent 8 months when I was like 17, 18 in Lake Tahoe, and about 8 months up in Washington, but other than that, been here. What was it like growing up in Hesperia? Well, when I was growing up, there wasn't much Hesperia, so there wasn't a whole lot to do. A lot of riding bikes and playing in the dirt, digging underground forts, things like that. Pretty rough. My dad didn't pay much attention to me, and my mom was pretty abusive. I think I first started running away when I was like 12 years old. Rebelled, yes. Had a don't care attitude about life. If it was fun, do it. First few times, ran away, and mom would catch me, you know, days later. Sometimes, I think the longest was like a week later. And then eventually got in trouble legally. Did some time in juvenile hall. Oh man, we used to do all kinds of crazy stuff. One of the craziest things I think we ever did was duct taped a concussion grenade to a Joshua tree at like 6 o'clock in the morning with a foot of snow on the ground. First time I ever smoked pot was the first time I also ever drank, and that was with my older brother. I was living in Summit Valley, which is a rural area just outside of town. And we were on 40 acres of land. My brother was staying there with his girlfriend. He's like 7 years older than I am. And he busts out with a 4-pack of wine coolers and a big old bag of joints and says, "Hey, you want to do this?" And I'm like, okay. Find some good drugs, have a good party. Some of my friends, their parents would throw big old birthday parties with lots of alcohol, and we would get our money together, get whatever drugs we could, and just party. That was, you know, when you didn't like reality and what was going on around you, best way to escape it was to create your own reality with whatever drugs you could get your hands on. The first day of junior high, one of the assistant principals walks up and goes, "Oh, you're trans brother, aren't you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why?" And he's like, "Oh, I'll be watching you." So I knew I was pretty much screwed by that point. You know, it was going to be all bad for me. So instantly it was like, well, you know, I kind of already had that You know, why care? Because it's only going to be bad anyway attitude. So that's when the partying began. You know, ditch school as often as you could, get in fights, you know, chase girls, whatever seemed fun. Okay. Well, to start, I was not raised in a church, no belief system of God whatsoever. As I got older, I got cocky about it. I used to go around telling people I was God and I could prove it. And when they asked me how, I would tell them, well, you ever heard of Jehovah? Hi, I'm Joe. And that was my running joke. I had, when I was, you know, very young, like 5 years old, I had two friends, Vic and Victor, who moved up to the high desert. Victor was 5, Vic was 4 when I met them, and we became really close friends and stayed friends through all of growing up, still friends now. One of the two, Vic, while we were still back in high school, if I remember right, might have been close to getting out of high school, but he was still pretty young. You know, he partied and everything like we did, and then one day he just quit and was like, you know, I found a new way, and, you know, it was all about this God guy. And, you know, I remember when I was like 7 years old maybe, I went to church because they were raised Catholic. I went to church with them one time, and I don't even remember what it was about, because I was just there to hang out and play with my buddies. So, you know, I had no, I don't want to say I hated God or anything like that, but there was no hate or love for something that I didn't even believe existed. Full-on atheist, absolutely. I believe that when you were alive, and when you're dead, you're done. That's it. There is no afterlife. There is nothing beyond whatever happens here. And it didn't bother me that was. I was fine with me. I didn't care. I was, you know, it just meant make the most of whatever you had here, and because you ain't got nothing to worry about afterwards. So live it however you wanted. Not in my family. I mean, I know, like, my grandmother believes and my mom believes now. I don't know how she felt when I was growing up. Like I said, growing up, I couldn't stand my mom back then because of the type of person that I perceived her to be. It's not the case now, but that's besides the point at this point. But Vic really got heavy into believing and started doing bands. And initially, before he became a believer, he was in secular bands, and I used to help out with that, doing stuff like what they call a roadie, helping with the equipment. I even had some speakers and stuff and helped provide some of the equipment for these bands that they were doing. But then he got into these Christian bands, and even though I wasn't a believer, I really enjoyed doing the work behind the scenes with these bands. So I continued to help him and his bands go all over the place. I remember, I don't even remember all the places. One of the places I do remember was California City. We did a show there, and a few other places, and I really enjoyed doing that. And of course, at these shows, you know, they would play music, but it was all about trying to share the gospel with people. So I would be there and I would hear it, you know, and the band members, Larry and some of the other guys that were in the band with Vic, you know, they would all try to share with me, and I would laugh at them and tell them, man, you guys are nuts. You don't know what you're talking about. And they'd be like, okay, well, you know, and they'd let it go. And then, but they would, you know, the next show would come along and they would try again. So yeah, I mean, there would come a point when it was tried to share to me, but I didn't want to hear it. That didn't happen until I was 37. Been married to my wife almost 20 years. And unfortunately, when I got back to the desert, I got back to the drugs. And I did pretty good. I mean, I went to ITT. I got my GED. Then went to ITT, got an associate's degree in electronic engineering. Was doing computers. Had some really good jobs. I worked for the county for a while. But I was still doing drugs, and really, I mean, pot was like my main drug. I got up, would get high. I'd come home from lunch, get high, go back to work high. And I mean, I worked for Department of Children's Services as a computer tech. So I'm going back, I don't want to say stoned out of my mind, because I got so used to smoking pot that I didn't even get stoned anymore. I just got normal, if that makes sense. But still very much in the world. Then I started getting back into other drugs, mainly meth. And, that stuff, it seems great. All the cool feelings you get or whatever, or the energy you think you have from it and this and that. But what you don't realize, what happens in the background, is you slowly lose focus on the important things like your family. So, when I say the ultimate result was my wife throwing me out of the house, moving her boyfriend in, and filing for divorce, is what the major event that brought me to Christ. By saying it's not all on her, I mean, yes, she should not have, be it there was any physical attachment, or if it was just an emotional betrayal, I guess is what you could say. I can't put it all on her shoulders, because I was not there for my family emotionally. I had dirt bikes. At that time, I had a 96 CR125 two-stroke dirt bike and an '04 CRF 250 four-stroke dirt bike, and a bunch of little pit bikes and all these dirt bike. And all day long, me and my buddies are off riding the big bikes, and then we come home, the sun would go down, eat dinner, go back out of the garage, do some more dope, and jump on the little bikes that had headlights and go riding until sometimes 7 o'clock in the morning. I did that for 3 years straight, every day. You cannot do that and not expect your family to suffer because you're not there. So, I want to be really clear that, I blame myself as much as anybody else that, for the divorce. But that said, I did not have God in my life at that time. So my wife was my life. I truly believed and imagined me and her growing old together. And I find out that she's got this other guy in her life. I just, I lost it. At this moment, I'm sleeping on the couch. And her and my daughter thought I was asleep. They were in the kitchen talking, and I was just laying there, and I overheard them talking, and this is when I find out about this guy. And then my wife goes to go take her walk that she always took at the college around the track there. Well, as soon as she leaves, I go to my daughter's room and I confront her. I'm like, what's going on? Who is this guy? Blah, blah, blah. My daughter doesn't want to tell me, probably afraid that I'm going to flip out on her. So I jump in my car and I take off. And I go to the college, I find her, I confront her. You know, she admits that, yeah, there's this guy. You know, she says, oh, well, nothing's happened, but yes. And, you know, so at that point I tell her, well, so what you're telling me is I got nothing to live for and I should just kill myself. And she says, well, people that are going to do that don't just talk about it, they do it. And I said, is that right? So I take off and I jump in my truck and I go tearing off out of there so fast that I come around a corner and my Range Rover goes up on two wheels. I don't know how it didn't tip over right there, but I get it back down and I tear off and I'm shooting down Bear Valley like 70 miles an hour, running every light, stop sign. I didn't care. Somebody that was at the time a friend, looking back, he was not a friend. He was just somebody I was getting my drugs from. And he was using me as much as I was using him. But when everything first started happening, I had a Ruger P89 9mm handgun that I owned. And I'd given it to him to hold it, told him, here, hold on to this so I don't do anything stupid with it. And so I get to his house. I'm like, hey, man, where's the gun? I got it sold. You know, and he's like, what? What do you mean? I thought you told me to keep the gun. You're not going to do anything dumb. I said, no, man, I got it sold to somebody. I need the money. Where's my gun? And he's like, oh, okay, here you go. So he gives me my gun. I haul butt back to the house, and by this time, my wife's already home, and she's in her room. So I come screeching up, sliding sideways into the front yard, jump out of the car, go into the garage, barricade the door with all kinds of stuff I had in there, go into my little office that I had built in the back of the garage, grab a clip, put it in the gun, pull it back to load it, and the slide gets stuck. So I'm messing with it, and it releases and shoots a round off into the ground. My wife hears that, and of course she calls the police. But I sit down, Indian style, light a cigarette, crying, you know, because I feel like my world's coming to an end. And I put the gun to my head and couldn't do it. Wanted to pull the trigger so bad and just couldn't do it. Cussing myself out, calling myself all kinds of names. And then I hear the sirens. So now I know, well, this is for real now. You know, the cops are here. There's no getting out of it. I'm assuming, because I'm in the garage, but I'm assuming they're standing at the front door yelling for me. Telling me they just want to talk to me, this, that, and the other. So I go and I turn the radio I have up in the garage as loud as I can turn it up so I can't hear them no more. And you know, the first thing that came into my mind, and I'm sure this was God, you know, trying to intervene, but, you know, was the picture of my wife and my daughter, because my two boys were not at home, but my daughter was. Picture of them seeing me get blown away by the cops. And I just started crying. I'm like, I can't do that. So then I look around and I see one of my little dirt bikes. You know, it looks like a regular dirt bike, but they're small. They call them pit bikes. And it had a full tank of gas. And I looked at my office and I said, well, that'll do it. So then I pushed it backwards into my little office that I had built in the back of the garage and laid there on the ground with it idling. And I remember the exhaust blowing in my face. And I know those bikes very well. With a full tank, I could run all out for 2 hours riding it. So it was nothing for the thing to be able to idle for 4 hours. And so I laid there for 4 hours. It ran until it ran out of gas. And I remember the last thing I thought was, well, I hope that's enough. And then I was gone. I passed out. This whole incident made it in the newspaper. They had SWAT team there, evacuated neighbors' houses. I was told by my neighbor that they even brought out their armored vehicle. Apparently they had cut the power at some point, because when I came to, I just sat up gasping for air. I remember my body just felt weird, like I can't even explain. I couldn't even really, it was almost like I wasn't in my body, because I couldn't really feel it. It was just all tingly and felt really weird. My legs wouldn't work. And I realized that when I stood up and instantly fell over and knocked my bike over and fell back to the ground. And what's really weird is I remember myself yelling, "Help me, somebody help me." And they were like, "Well, open the garage door." And they wanted me to open the big garage door. And I told them I can't stand up. You know, what's really weird is in my head, I'm thinking, why are you yelling for help? You don't want help. I didn't want help, I wanted dead. But somehow, I'm trying to drag myself around the garage. I'm going the wrong way in the dark. And I remember putting my hand on an engine stand that had an engine in my garage, and then that made me realize that I was going the wrong way. I mean, that's how out of it I was. I didn't even know which direction was what in my garage. And I turned myself around, and I'm dragging myself towards the door that goes into the house. And I don't even know how I managed to knock all the stuff out of the way that was blocking the door. Because, I mean, I had load locks wedged against the car and the door and this and that. And, I mean, there was all kinds of stuff. There was no way they were getting in. And when I was coming back down, because I was almost ready to pass out again, I remember my hand hit the handle and kind of rolled down it. And when it did, it opened the door, and it was a spring-loaded door. So when it opened, it started to close again, just as I fell to my back on the ground. And I guess one of the SWAT team cops, they stuck their foot in the door before it closed, probably so they could see what I was doing. And seeing that I was laying on my back on the ground, threw the door open, and they had a new thing they called a shotgun taser, which is a shotgun shell that has a taser built into it. And when they shoot it, the whole shell comes out of the gun with barbs, and it sticks in you and automatically shocks you for 20 seconds. So they shot me with that, basically tased me, jumped on me, rolled me over, handcuffed me, and then one of the cops proceeded to kick me in the head 3 times and broke my jaw. So there's blood everywhere in the garage. They drug me out through the house, out and tossed me in the back of a cop car. So there's blood going all through the house. Then they took me to the hospital. And at the hospital, it took 3 bottles of oxygen, turned all the way up, to do what they call scrub the CO2 out of my blood, which is basically just straight oxygen until the CO2 is gone out of your blood system and the oxygen is back. That's how much CO2 I had in my blood. So, you know, here I am 30 minutes unconscious, not breathing, and not only did I survive, but I survived intact with no side effects from it. So it got me thinking, you know, how did that happen? And that's when I started to realize that it had to have been God. Well, unfortunately, she filed for divorce. She got a restraining order. I really did try to convince her, that I loved her and that I would be willing to do whatever it took to show her that I loved her. And she wasn't going to have it. So it took about 3 years for everything to happen, and the divorce got finalized. And she still wants nothing to do with me, thinks I'm a piece of crap, which is not, that's hard, because I do still love her a lot. I told her on the phone one time, I said, that as rough as this was, that it happened so that I would believe in Jesus and I would accept Christ in my life. And no matter what she thinks about me, I know that touched her, because she almost cried on the phone. When we were married, she used to talk about, being worried because she said she believed in God and she felt she was going to heaven, and she was concerned because I did not, and that I wouldn't be there when she got there. So it, and God knows how to do it. I tell people all the time that I'm a very stubborn person, and had a paramedic come in there and give me CPR and revive me, or one of those police officers or anything like that, I would have never gave God the credit for that. I would have believed it. I would have told people it wasn't God that did it. It was that paramedic or that police officer that gave me CPR. That's what revived me. So he orchestrated it in such a way that I could not deny him and who he was, by bringing me back to life in a barricaded, dark garage with nobody around. So there was nobody else that it could be but him. And that's what hit me the hardest, and it still took a few days, because after the hospital, they of course took me to jail, and I was in jail kind of pacing around in circles, and there was a group of guys sitting at a table doing a Bible study. And I remember walking around, and the first time I passed by him, I remember hearing a voice tell me to go sit down with him. So I'm like, you know what, fine, whatever. Still that defiant attitude of, yeah, whatever, fine. And so I walked up and I said, heard you guys talking, you mind if I sit down? They're like, no, come on, brother, sit down. You believer too? And I'm like, well, I don't know what I believe anymore. Kind of told them what happened. And then just sat there and listened to them. Very, very spiritual man. And he was very upset because he didn't understand why he was there. And then when he left, he sat down with me and he says, I understand now why God put me here. He said, it was because I needed to be here to meet you, because he was the one that led me to Christ. And it was in there that I accepted Christ in my life. I did the sinner's prayer. So we went through the book of Acts and stuff like that. And he showed me Paul and, how Paul was a murderer and a persecutor. And, he's like, look, God has a purpose for you too. This is no mistake that this happened now, that you're in here now, that I'm in here now. It was so that, I could share this with you and you could see how much he really cares. And that, really just showed me that I'm more than the failures of my past. I'm more than the drug use, the failures as a husband and a father, just everything that I was before didn't define me, that Christ defines me. Of course, it still hurts that it cost me my family. And when I say it cost me a family, I'm talking about my wife. My youngest son, he still doesn't speak to me right now, but that's God's problem to work on at this point. I've done what I can do, so I've given that to God. My daughter, it's still kind of there. I mean, we talk now and then, but, it's not that great. But my oldest son, who used to think that I didn't like him, our relationship is better now than it ever was. And I, every chance I get, I give him a big hug and I tell him how much I love him and how good of a son he is. And so I really wish that things could have been different with me and my wife, that, that could have worked. But that said, I wouldn't take it back, because without everything that happened, I can sit here right now honestly and tell you that I would still believe there's no God, and that Christ didn't exist and didn't die on the cross, and that book is not truth, but, well, like I used to say, God didn't create man, man created God. And that's what I would sit here and believe right now, had all of that not happened. So as much as I wish that I didn't have that happen to me, on one hand, on the other hand, if this is what it took for me to know God and to know Christ and to see the blessings that I have now in my life, then, I accept it and I'm grateful for it. When all that happened, I was living in my car, wherever I could park it, scrounging for this or that. And, thank God for my sister Kimmy, because she gave me a place when I had no place. But, I continually sought God, and I found a good church in New Life Chapel where I go now, and a good church family, and I got my head on and got focused to God, got in His Word, and then He restored me with a job, with a vehicle, with a roof over my head. I mean, I went from losing everything to having a nice vehicle. I got dirt bikes again. I got, a good job. Real friends now, not the friends that I had when I was on drugs, who all disappeared once all hell broke loose. I got friends now that I can honestly say, if I'm down, they will come lift me up. Good Christian friends that care and love each other. And it's something that I wouldn't trade for anything. I would say for those watching, and mind you, when I say this, I realize through my own experiences that this is probably not going to be the case, but don't wait until life is at that point where you're at your bottom and things are so bad that you have nowhere else to go but to Him. I say that, but I realize even in my own life and so many other friends I see, it always seems like it takes some huge traumatic experience for us to finally seek God in our lives. And I think that's the biggest, the saddest thing that I see is that we have to be at our lowest point to seek Him, because once you do and you find out just how great He is and just how much He does for your life, and you think, man, why did I wait until it was so bad? Why couldn't I have just seeked Him out sooner? You know, so my advice would be, don't wait until you're at that lowest point in your life to find Him. Seek Him now, before that. It really is worth it. Like putting on the armor of God.
There you go. Action.
All right, so what we got here, this is a 2006 CRF 450 4-stroke. Very fast, very fun.